I'm hoping that rounding numbers is revision for you, but just like all my past classes, I don't assume that. I teach it from scratch. At SACE level, you need to be consistent with rounding and indicating rounding, because when you round, you've lost accuracy. Let's see if I can show you an example here. If I did 1 divided by 3, do I want to write all those 3s? If I wrote 0.33, is that the perfectly correct answer? No, I've lost accuracy. The perfectly correct answer to 1 divided by 3 is 0.3 going on forever. If I cut it to 0.33, that's not the right answer. It's close, but it's lost accuracy. So today's lesson is to formally show you how do I round an indicator at SACE level. So please get these rules down. You might already know how to do these. That's fine. But if you're going to say that you already know how to do it, if you make a mistake in your test, I'll show you. So step 1, if I'm rounding, decide how many decimal points you want to round to. Step 2, you look at the decimal place after where you're rounding to. Then you have 2 options. If the number is less than 5, you leave the numbers unchanged and you cut it off. If the number is 5 or more, then you increase the number you're rounding to by 1 and then cut off. So your first writing time, I'd like you to get to the end of point B. These are rounding rules. Step 1, decide where you're going to cut it off to. Step 2, look at the number after where you're cutting off. If it's less than 5, don't do anything. If it's more than 5, you increase by 1. There's more seats down here. So I say again, if you're rounding, first step, you need to know where you're rounding to, what you're going to cut it off to. What do you do after you've decided that? Look at the number after your cutoff point. If it's less than 5, you just cut off. If it's 5 or more, you increase the number you're rounding to by 1 and then you cut off. Step 3 is new. I might have hit that with the Ignites that I had last year. But for everyone else, you need to write something else after your rounded number. After the rounded number, you need to indicate how many decimal points you rounded to with something in brackets that says DP. If I've said decimal place and I say DP is a shortening for something, what do you reckon DP stands for? Decimal places. So if I rounded to 2 decimal places, it would say bracket 2DP. If you're rounding to whole numbers, you just tell me where you rounded to. So if you rounded to the nearest 10, you'd say bracket tens, bracket hundreds, bracket thousands. Last little point, when rounding to whole number places, instead of cutting off, you write zeros instead. So another writing time here for that. If you're used to being in my class and writing, you can start getting the examples down. Now let me demonstrate. I have this number, 153,625. That is 153,625. I want to round it to the nearest 10,000. We might have to review some things though, because for you to know where to cut off, you need to know which is the 10,000s. Hopefully you did this in primary school. You did the columns, you had the decimal point here. What column is the 5 in? You might have ones, some people might have called them units. So if those are ones, what column is the 2 in? Tens. 6 is in? Hundreds. 3? So 5 would be in the 10,000s. So I am rounding to the nearest 10,000. So on my number here, I want to cut it off between the 5 and the 3. So look at my steps, people. Decide how many decimal places I'm rounding to. I'm rounding to just after 5. Step 2, look at the decimal place after. So what number is after the cutoff point? Someone said 3. Squeak. 3. I'm looking at 3. And then I'm making a decision. Is the number less than 5? Yes. Yes? So if the number's less than 5, you leave the numbers unchanged and cut off. But because we're doing big numbers, instead of cutting off, when you're rounding to whole number places, you write zeros instead. So I leave 1 and 5 alone. And what do I replace everything else with? Zeros. That's like you're cutting off. Hopefully that demonstrated. Step 1, decide where you're going to cut off. I am cutting off after the 5. Step 2, look at the number after. It's 3, it's less than 5. So I cut off and replace with zeros. Based on those rules, am I missing something? What does step 3 say that I need to do? I need to put in brackets and tell me the level of accuracy or rounding that I did. What did the question ask me to round to? The nearest 10,000. So you go bracket 10,000s. Done. Part B. We're using the same number, 153,625, but I want to round to the nearest 10. Where am I going to put my dotted line to indicate the cutoff? Between what? After the 2. I want to cut off between the 2 and the 5. That's my cutoff point. What number do I look at though to make a decision? The 5 or the 2? 5. I'm looking at the number after, so I look at 5. Is that less than 5 or is that 5 or more?
5 or more.
5 or more. So according to the law, what do? You increase the number you're rounding to by 1. I'm rounding this. So what's 2 going to become? 3. And then I cut off. So your answer is going to be 1, 5, 3, 6, 3, 0, bracket, 10s. Hopefully that demonstrates those steps. Can you get some writing time? Get down to that example. Then I'll show you with decimals. And then I'll shut my mouth. Yes, question? Well, because we're doing, these aren't decimal places, they're whole numbers. So you wouldn't write like, what's a way to do it? Like, if I wrote this, 0.123, how many numbers do I have after the decimal point? 3. So I'd write DP there because it's tiny numbers. But because these are wholes, these are giant, they're not DP, they're just tens, hundreds, thousands, etc. I'll do the DP now, okay? Use your calculator to write the answer to 1 divided by 7, but then round the answer to. So anything divided by 7 is not nice. 1 divided by 7. So I'll write that. 0.142857114. That actually goes on forever. It never ends. It's a repeating pattern of 142857142 keeps going. I don't want to write all that. I want to cut it off to 3 decimal places. So where's my dotted line going to go? Where am I going to cut this off to if I want to round to 3 decimal points? Between what 2 numbers? 2 and 8. I want to cut it here. What number do I actually look at to make my decision though? Do I look at the 2 or do I look at the 8? I look at the number after. I'm looking at this. Is that number greater than 5 or is it less than 5?
Greater.
So what do I do with the 2? What happens to that?
Round up to 3.
Rounds up to 3. So 0.143 cut off. Nothing left. In brackets, what would I write? How many decimal points did I just round this off to? How many numbers are after the decimal point? 3. 3 DP. I'll write my thing here again. 0.142857114. ... One more example and then... The last question, if I wanted to round it to 6 decimal places, someone other than you, because you keep answering it. Where's my dotted line going to go if I want to round to 6 decimal places? Between which numbers? Between 7 and 1. So ... I use the 1 to make my decision. Is that less than 5? So when it's less than 5, what do? Do I change anything? No, just cut off. So it's going to be, so therefore 0.142857 bracket 6 DP.